Good evening, Mayor, Council. Today I'm going to go over the Neighborhood Services Department, specifically going over some strategies that are in the works, as well as go over our budget offers and such in the presentation as well. So just to give a high-level overview of what we're covered today, what I did was, upon coming to Neighborhood Services, was to do an evaluation of our code enforcement approach and to look at opportunities to kind of improve what we're doing today. Those opportunities address some of Council's concerns. We've also worked to streamline some of our internal policies so that we're more effective with the resources that we have today. And then also to another opportunity that identified on doing the kind of the evaluation I did at the beginning of coming on to Neighborhood Services was we have an opportunity to better educate our public. That is something that I'll speak to in a little bit more detail what I mean by that, but there is an opportunity to work better with the public, specifically some of our neighborhood associations and crime watch areas. The potential is our goal is to make a community that residents are proud to call home. So without further ado, I'll go into a little bit more detail. Some of our accomplishments, I thought I would list those kind of in the beginning for you. We've added some staffing, which was done when Neighborhood Services was created. Not only my position, but also we added 2 code officers that would assist our resources as far as staffing and also to provide weekend coverage. So we do have code enforcement officers working on Saturdays as a result of that addition of staff. We've also added the Code Ambassador program, which many of you were at the graduation, and it was actually a colleague of yours that suggested a volunteer code program. We graduated 29 volunteers that are out in the community. They're out on Saturdays and Sundays. This is for June. I don't have the most of the July numbers yet, but for June, we identified, I say we, our code ambassadors identified 141 violations, 25 of which were passed on to our code enforcement officers for further enforcement. So when you break down the numbers, what we're finding is that we have a 72% compliance rate from the notices that our code ambassadors are sending out, which we find is a success. So we're definitely leveraging our volunteers' time, and I'm happy to say it's being put to good use, in my opinion. Also, we've updated some of our procedures, as I kind of alluded to. We have created a policy document that all code officers are now using, and now we're still doing some tweaking. And what I mean by policies are kind of our standard operating procedures that they're utilizing. So that everybody is operating in a more uniform way. This allows us to better and to more across the board ensure that the same level of enforcement is occurring throughout the community. Also, we have implemented our Helping Others in Mesquite every day, which we are finding many successes. So that program continues to grow. And again, that is something that our code enforcement staff identify. I'm sorry?
I was just going to point out to everybody that Raymond's slides, if you're looking for them, are under tab 8 in your book, about halfway through.
Hopefully I make these big enough for most to see. So thank you, Cliff. So Helping Others in Mesquite Every Day, our home program, is continuing to grow, and our code officers are continually looking for those proposed projects to implement. So going back to the basic, why I'm here really is because you all had a goal, and that is neighborhood appearance and condition. So some of the top priorities that were identified were creating new strategies to address common code environmental and building code issues, and to prioritize code enforcement strategies and efforts. There are some challenges that most departments have encountered, I'm sure, before me, but some of the challenges that I've identified are that we have an aging housing stock throughout the community and property maintenance issues. So as your housing stock gets older, we do see some property maintenance issues that we have to work with residents on. We also are seeing vacant properties and structures, and that takes a little bit of staff time, honestly, to ensure that those vacant properties are being addressed, whether they're being secured or that we are ensuring that for instance, that the lawns are being maintained and shrubs and so forth. So it does take staff time to ensure that those are being properly addressed. We also have a high number of rental properties. The last figure that I saw was somewhere around 20 or close to 20% of our housing stock are rental properties. And why that is a challenge is because as you have new residents coming in to those rental properties, that's where I think the education can be valuable, is because most people for the first time are occupying a house. So there are some differences if they were, for instance, renting an apartment that come along with maintaining a house. So that is definitely something that we see that we could be doing a little bit better on. Also, public outreach and education, again, just so people know, such as trash placement or what the rules are as far as maintaining the alley behind your property. Those are some opportunities for public outreach. And then also balancing the volume of complaints versus proactive code. Obviously, we want our staff to be proactive, and there are some things that I will speak to, some strategies here in a bit on how we plan to balance some of the proactiveness versus addressing some of the complaints that we receive from residents. So our first strategy is we need to increase enforcement. This is something that I've heard from almost everybody on council and that we're working to address. So some of that starts with updating our ordinances. Some of them aren't major changes, but some are slight. One ordinance, for instance, I've highlighted two. These aren't just the only two that need to be updated, but they just highlight some of the ones that we will be bringing to you this fall. Is garage sale ordinance. Again, we had our town hall meeting where we actually quizzed our residents on what they thought a fair amount of garage sales were, and it was in line with what our current policy is of 2 garage sales per residence. However, it is an ordinance that's difficult to maintain. Right now, there's not a permit that's required, so staff actually has to observe a garage sale going on, and we have to manually notate that, or we rely on residents calling us to let us know that there's multiple garage sales going on in their neighborhood that are becoming a nuisance, for instance. So we'll bring together a staff recommendation of requiring some type of a permit in the future so that our staff can better identify and keep track of garage sales going out on the community. Also, interoperable junk vehicle ordinance. This is one that's not a major change, but there are some changes in state law that our ordinances need to be updated to reflect, and one of those is our classic car language. That definition isn't currently in there, which just brings additional inspection requirements from the state.
So my 1969 Volkswagen is not a classic? Not really?
It might be. But yes, so just updating some of the languages in our existing ordinances is needed. And we probably need to do that across the board as far as everything that does involve code enforcement. Also, we need to ensure that ordinances are being enforced aggressively that we already have on the books. Some of those may require, well, not may require, but do require, for instance, property maintenance. Again, we do see some issues out due to our aging housing stock of those types of violations. Also, our next strategy as far as increasing enforcement is to crack down on repeat offenders, and this can be done by automatically contracting properties that have already received notices for instance, high weeds and grass or loose trash and debris. So rather than just going through the process of sending out these notice of violations, that after you receive your first one, that we would be more diligent to go to our strongest level of enforcement, which would be either to contract it or to issue citations, depending on which one is appropriate for that instance. Also, we've worked with our municipal courts on increasing or having escalating fines for these repeat offenders. Where this would be helpful is for vehicles parking on unimproved surface. So that is one that we see on a regular basis. So there would be essentially three levels of fines. Your first offense would be the minimum. The second, for instance, would be kind of in between the minimum and the maximum. Then after that second violation, it would be the maximum fine thereafter. So again, looking at opportunities to work with our municipal courts to implement those fines moving forward. So both of these do involve a change of philosophy of our staff, and I think that they are eager to go out and be more aggressive. And I've given them your message that that's exactly what we need to be doing out in our community. Also, increasing enforcement is identifying another contractor that can assist in code abatement. Right now, we have one contractor. We actually, for this size of community, need to have multiple contractors that we can call on to abate these issues. And where this would be helpful is especially during the springtime where we have high vegetative growth. And it's hard for a contractor, even with a couple of crews, for instance, to keep up. So moving forward, that is something that we will change moving forward. We will always have multiple tools at our disposal for contractors. So I'm actually in the process of working with our purchasing department right now to get a second contractor identified. So some of these are strategies that we've identified that we are in the process of today implementing. There could be a cost associated with this, and that could be $50,000. Of course, bringing on a second contractor, it would require, a bigger commitment as far as increasing that budget line. Right now, I don't know an exact figure. This is just a placeholder for now. Obviously, we would best utilize the funds that we receive for code abatement today, obviously. So, but moving forward, there may be an increase in our cost. Also, developing a more robust illegal dumping program. This is something that we have also heard from some council members that they want a better and higher level of enforcement going on in our community. So there are already state health codes that establish fines, and they range from misdemeanors to all the way to felony type level of offenses. So on the books, we already have the structure in place to pursue illegal dumping. It's just we need to better refine how we're going to catch the offenders, if you will, in the act. So I have put in a program together. It's an anticipated cost of about $20,000, where we would use surveillance equipment and also better partner with law enforcement to do criminal type prosecutions for these offenses. So these are, again, two other increasing enforcement out in our community that we've identified. These are some timelines. Again, they look familiar. We've borrowed it from Kim. We're trying to standardize some things so that it looks a little familiar. So these are our timeline as far as the 4 strategies that I put together. Some of these, as I said, are already in progress. Actually, all of them are. We're exploring how we can better enforce those ordinances that are on the books. Some of them, again, do require a small or nominal increase in our budget. But again, we're going to try to best utilize the funds that have already been allocated to us first. So again, a lot of these, I hope to have an update for you on most of these later this fall, most likely when I'm updating or bringing ordinance updates to council. So our second strategy is community and outreach. So as I mentioned, we've seen an increase in public education requests. Creating a new department spurred a lot of intrigue from a lot of those neighborhood associations and Crime Watch. So it has taken some staff time. One of the things that I thought was important is taking code enforcement officers to those meetings so that the residents could meet their code enforcement officer as well. But we do need some additional assistance as far as delivering a more robust program moving forward. Also, as our code ambassador program grows, it does take a higher level of staff time to manage the program. This is due to identifying the areas that need to be worked by our volunteers, as well as providing some quality assurance. We do review the violations that are reported to us to ensure that they are violations, since the notice of violations that our code ambassadors send do constitute our first notice. So we do want to make sure that when we're sending out these notices that they are for actual violations. So I say all that is that it does require a lot more staff time than we anticipated, but the program is successful, and again, we are looking to grow that. Also, we are looking, as far as neighborhood services, to take on addressing Mesquite Day. So in preparation of taking on that program, it is something that we would need additional resources to really make that a success. And then also managing our home program is a need, and I have a budget offer that I'll speak to specifically for this that just focuses on these programs that you see before you. Also, what we will be asking for is a special investigations officer, which will handle a lot of our more unique code violation investigations. Some of those include the illegal dumping that I mentioned, as well as we do get on a number of occasions violations that just require more than what we can catch in, say for instance, an 8 to 5 business day. So having somebody that would specifically be working to work those unique cases that require a little bit more staff time is something that I identified as something that we need. We're also working with our GIS department to work and develop heat maps so that we are appropriately distributing our staff. So there are some tools that we're already utilizing to do some initial legwork for any of these projects. So again, community outreach, these are something that are contingent on, well, I'm not going to say contingent on, we're going to do our best to address the needs of our community with the resources that we have. But again, looking at our budget offers, we will be asking for 2 positions. And again, my timeline reflects that. It's kind of contingent on a lot of these growing as anticipated or as we would like to on some additional funding for 2 positions. So I have that starting at the first of our budget year. Also, allocation of resources. Our code enforcement officer boundaries right now, they were mostly done by just looking at a map and using roadways as a way to divide our workload. Upon getting here, I'm more of an analytical type person, and I like to dive into the actual data. So I'm actually working with our GIS department that has used all the information from our current system to use a weighted approach to our work staff and how we divide our areas. So instead of just using land area, and when I say area, that also is reflective of streets and so forth, because it does take some time to get through some of our larger boundaries. But it will be a 20% weighted approach, whereas violations that we identify proactively accounts for 50% of our violations, and 30% of our map moving forward will be representative of 30% of the complaints that we receive. Now, the beauty of this is that we can change these numbers, right? So by no means what we will redesign today. My intent is to evaluate the success of the redistricting of our area. So it is not something that will just live on for another 5 years. It's something that we will actually evaluate immediately, and then also look at every few years to ensure as our community changes that we are changing with it. So that is something that's exciting, and our GIS folks have been really phenomenal to work with through this process. So again, speaking to, we're already in the process of working with GIS to identify these new areas. This fall, we will evaluate some of the work that as we implement it to ensure that it is successful to what we need or to the level of success that you all expect. And then also before our new software, which Develop 21, which is actually something that Richard Gertson's group is heading up, it incorporates a new code enforcement module. So before we roll that out, moving forward this spring, we would make any appropriate changes based on what we find in that evaluation period. Our budget offers, again, did I skip a slide? No, I did. I wasn't trying to hide anything. Our budget for next year, it is very comparable to what we have today. There has been a slight increase as far as on personnel services, which again, all departments have seen an increase, for instance, on workers' comp. But for the most part, we are getting the same amounts as we had last year. We're still utilizing our CDBG grant to have a robust code enforcement program. As you can see, there's no major changes to that program. We are best utilizing the allocations that we are given. So our budget offers for next year is to bring up to onboard a neighborhood service analyst. This would be somebody that could really assist us with developing and delivering a robust public education program, to take over the Code Ambassador program moving forward, so take a lot more of that management role. Also, bring them into the loop for heading up addressing Mesquite Day and are helping others in Mesquite Everyday program as well. The anticipated cost is $65,000. This is a total cost for year one, so it not only includes salary but also computer equipment, some training classes, and so forth that we would send this position to. So the ongoing cost would actually be a little bit lower because the year one cost will be higher. Special Investigations Officer, again, would address our vacant structures. What I really would like for this position to do is come up with a comprehensive database of our vacant structures so that we can better track. Some communities have implemented permit type programs where, for instance, if a property is going to be vacant for a long period of time, that the property owner actually has to file a permit to let us know that it will be vacant. So exploring programs such as that to see if it would be a good fit for our community, but also take care of what we have today that we know of. Also performing proactive sweeps, so this person would also help with doing a lot of proactive code throughout the year in our existing areas. And then also to focus on the legal dumping program that I mentioned. This position has a higher initial cost because it's not only staff, but it also includes a vehicle and some tools that our code officers use on a day-to-day basis. So that is why that number is a little bit higher than the neighborhood services analyst. But to summarize, neighborhood services staff is committed to addressing your priorities as far as that you set forth for neighborhood and community appearance. And we're trying to take the innovative approaches that are at our disposal. So it's something that every day, I think that working with city manager staff with some of the concerns that you all report, we are coming up with innovative ways that we can be ahead of the curve versus being reactive. So our budget offers, again, are listed above, and they would total, I didn't put a total, but the total asking for both of those combined in this upcoming budget year would be $147,000. So without further ado, that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Real quick, those are in addition to your proposed budget for 16, 17, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any questions for Frank? Yes, sir.
Very good presentation, by the way. The one question I had was with regard to the vacant building permit.
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked at whether or not there'd be a revenue component to that in terms of charging a fee, a permit fee?
Looking at, and I looked at ICMA, other cities that have had similar systems or programs. Some of them do include a fee. Some of them don't. Some of them just use it as a tool to better know what vacant structures are out in the community. So there's a combination of best practices that are out there.
I'd be real intrigued and would be interested in hearing before we finalize the budget whether or not there's a revenue component that we could incorporate in that.
Sure.
So
that's something I can have ready for our budget retreat, council member.
Thank you.
Great question. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a few, again, great presentations, Councilman O'Shea said. What are our current resources for the whole program in terms of the folks we need? Is there a bit of a waiting list, or how, when things come up, how easy are we able to help folks?
It really depends on the type of project. If it's a project, say for instance, like limbs or yard work, for instance, somebody's just not able to keep up with that. Those are a little bit easier. Now there are some projects that have a higher cost associated with them, and we prioritize those. So there are, for instance, a couple of bigger projects that are in the queue, but I feel like that the program has received great support so far as donations, that we're addressing as many as we can with the dollars that we have.
As far as long-term vacant houses, and I guess even commercial properties, but especially houses, I know there's different situations for every property, but
Sure.
Are we collaborating with legal in terms of trying to find quicker solutions to get these things expedited, so not sitting there for a year and a half?
Well, that's a great question, and we are. Actually, part of the T25 Initiative is to evaluate inter-department collaboration as well as look at policy adjustments that could equate to more aggressiveness moving forward to some of those vacant properties. So I think that the T25 project has been really great because it has brought legal to the table with us to look at what our tools are and how to best implement those.
In the city properties that we own, those are first on the contractor list, I'm assuming, in terms of when we address those highways and stuff, are those the first ones?
They are, yes, they're actually on a schedule that our staff will go out and look at those. So getting an additional contractor, for instance, will help us because, we're submitted those properties, for instance, every few weeks, and it's a challenge for us to keep up with those, with what we have existing. So I think looking for additional resources will help us better address some of those vacant properties that either the city owns or that there's a structure on the lot.
You don't ask that question. It's not fun getting hit by folks who say, why can't we take care of our own properties? And last one, how are we doing, I guess, weekend out in terms of average total batches going out each weekend? How many are going out? So
we have 4 shifts essentially each day. On Saturday and Sunday we have 2 in the morning and then 2 in the afternoon and early evening hours. And we have about 80% of the time we're filling up those time slots. So, definitely our citizens are out there and they are being proactive. So we're actually having great response as far as participation.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Brent. Good job.
Anybody else?
Raymond, a couple of things. One, the home program, which is addressing Mesquite Day, but every day of the year, if my memory serves me correct, that's an idea that Dennis Hartley brought to the city, and I think it through that, I think that's a great program. And kind of along the lines of the code ambassadors, I know that 29 citizens that have volunteered and have been trained to know what's a violation and what isn't. So they're going out and they're dealing with more negatives than there are positives, So I'm just curious, and I think you alluded to it just a little bit, but what your opinion is of the people that are doing that, their morale, their attitude about what they're doing.
I definitely think that going into the program, they didn't know what to expect, but I definitely, we have continuing education every few months for that program. And they feel like they're part of the solution, which is the goal of that program, is to involve residents and to put them to use. So, and I think that it has been a very, very successful program thus far.
Thank you.
Yes.
Would you, and maybe I missed it, but would you just in general terms give me a description of what the job description would be for the special investigation officer?
Sure. The job description would be, they would be a code officer, right? A state licensed code officer, such as our other officers are. The person would focus primarily on, as I said, on those investigations or those violations that require quite a bit of staff time. So what I mean by that is, for instance, there's some zoning violations that we will initially investigate, such as loud or excessive noise coming from a business that leads into a residential area. So some of those require after-hour or early morning investigations. So it's those types of violations that this person would really focus on. That right now, having staff cover some of those outside of that, their normal operating hours has been a challenge. But that this person would be the lead as far as taking the point, for instance, on those. Does that better answer your question, or am I not addressing it?
Do they have more authority than a regular code enforcement officer?
They would have the very similar authority as far as that they would be enforcing the same ordinances, where they would be a little bit more focused on the, say, for instance, the illegal dumping aspect is working with law enforcement, so with Mesquite Police Department, on pursuing those criminal charges. So some of those strategies might include putting out cameras, for instance, so to review camera feed of illegal dumpers in action, and then working with law enforcement to pursue a criminal type case. So some of those do require a little bit more staff time to implement successfully.
Is there additional training that would be involved for somebody like this?
No, sir. I mean, it would really be enforcing a lot of what our ordinances have, but also there may be some tweaks as far as training, like maybe sending them to, I know that the North Central Texas Council of Governments has regular trainings for illegal dumping, for instance, so we definitely would get them plugged in on how to best approach those violations.
I know 20 years ago, we had some pretty big issues with illegal dumping. Is it still a big problem in Mesquite?
We do occasionally, yes, we get quite a few complaints, especially some of our less in court or I guess occupied areas, such as around the airport where there's a lot of land off Berry Road, for instance, is one that pops to mind.
Usually where we were thinking back then.
Yeah, where there's just not a lot of residents. We really depend today on people calling us when they see something occurring. So, it is difficult in those less occupied areas to catch somebody in the actual act. So that's where we're looking at having additional type strategies to address that with cameras, for instance.
Okay, I think that's all.
Okay, no problem.
I was going to ask if you were going to be offering an additional code officer, but it sounds like that's what the special investigation officer is, who's just going to specialize in some more tricky circumstances.
Sure, but also that person could be put to use depending on, again, addressing those special cases first, but if they still have, say, for instance, some available time to actually assist other code officers in that proactive code. So going out, doing sweeps, for instance, and there's some other programs that we're currently working with city management on doing pilot programs. So using that position to address some of those proactive code violations and catching, being more proactive, if you will. I'm sorry.
So you think with the 9 code officers we have, is that correct?
Yes, correct. We have 9.
Plus this kind of specialty one, does that give you the desired capacity you have to be 50% proactive time where they're out there kind of patrolling?
I think it builds in a lot more flexibility than what we have today. Today, our 9 folks are all assigned districts, for instance. We could use this person to help us not being assigned an area. We can move them around to trouble spots. So they would also be doing a high-intensity type approach. If we were seeing a lot of violations in certain areas and we could deploy them for a short amount of time to almost double the manpower, if you will, in that area. So again, we can use that position in other areas, which would give us a lot more flexibility than we don't have today.
Thank you.
Yes, Dan?
Just a great presentation, really good.
Thank you.
Just to mention, I remember the town hall meeting we had a while back with the code enforcement. Someone made mention about nighttime code officers going out. Do we have that?
We do have some after hours, yes, sir.